From sea to shining sea, the conflict over the Fort Laramie Treaties that compromised American values.
By Brooks Berry, Liv Bobby, Andre Mead, and Sebastian Zuba.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Chief Joseph, a Nez Perce Indian, declared,
If the white man wants to live in peace with the Indian, he can live in peace. Treat all men alike, give them all the same law, give them all an even chance to live and grow.
As Americans spread across the new country, the population grew, and so did the demand for resources. Conflict between the white settlers and the American Indians was inevitable.
The American Indians documented these conflicts with ledger drawings. As a non-literate society, these ledger drawings were their way of recording their history.
Conflict over resources led to violations of the 1851 and 1868 Fort Laramie Treaties.
and America's founding values of equality, democracy, and the rule of law were seriously compromised by greed and dishonesty.
As Martin Luther King Jr. said,
Our nation was born in genocide when it embraced the doctrine that the original American, the Indian, was an inferior race.
Henry Clay, a U.S. senator from the 1800s, said,
The Indian's disappearance from the human family would be no great loss to the world.
Conflict over resources compromised American values of equality. It is our manifest destiny to overspread the continent allotted by Providence. Go west, young men, and grow up with the country. Oh, beautiful for spacious skies, for amber waves of grain, for purple mountain majesties above the fruited plain. The 1851 Treaty of Fort Laramie, or the Horse Creek Treaty, dictated that American Indians relocate to contain reservations and that they allow white men safe travels through Indian land. In return, the Indians would receive payments for 50 years.
The government later reduced these payments to 10 years without the Indians' knowledge.
The Indians did not fully understand this treaty, and thus it offered them a false sense of peace. Cutnose said,
I will go home satisfied. I will sleep sound and not have to watch my horses in the night or be afraid for my squaws and children.
The cultural conflict and misunderstandings invalidated the treaty from both perspectives. The Indians did not understand the point of a written treaty, nor the concept of land ownership.
However, by 1862, their natural food sources were destroyed, and many of the Sioux were living in poverty and starving.
Government failure to deliver food rations caused starvation and angered the Indians. Red Cloud would later say,
You, who eat 3 times a day and see your children happy around you, cannot understand what a starving Indian feels. We were faint with hunger and maddened by despair. We held our dying children and felt their little bodies tremble as their soul went out and left only a dead weight in our hands. There was no hope on earth.
I, Little Crow, asked a trader to provide the Indians with food on credit.
If they are hungry, let them eat grass or their own dung.
In reply, the Indians murdered the trader and said, When men are hungry, they help themselves.
Thus began an Indian uprising that lasted 6 weeks.
A young white settler boy ran into camp saying,
The Indians attacked the camp where we were all asleep. My father and 5 other men attempted to get their guns, but too late. As the Indians rushed in from all sides and overpowered them before a shot could be fired, the work of a slaughter then began. An Indian put the muzzle of his gun against the head of one man and fired, blowing his brains against the floor and walls. They killed 5. I saw them kill my mother and 2 little brothers by beating their brains out with stones.
This young boy's story was told in the Daily Decotion in 1882. Tales of this type ran in newspapers across the U.S., painting a savage picture of the American Indians.
Black Kettle was camped at Sand Creek with the intent to negotiate, but Colonel John Shivington responded,
Kill and scalp all, big and little.
What followed became known as the Sand Creek Massacre. Robert Bent, a guide who survived, said,
They sent out a little girl, about 6 years old, with a white flag on a stick. She had not proceeded but a few steps when she was shot and killed. The squaws offered no resistance. Everyone I saw dead was scalped. I saw one squaw cut open with an unborn child lying on her side. I saw quite a number of infants in the arms, killed with their mothers.
I, Chief Black Kettle, survived the battle, but my shame is as big as the earth. I once thought that I was the only man that persevered to be the friend of the white man, but it is hard for me to believe the white man anymore.
Consequently, the U.S. government instituted a peace policy, resulting in the 1868 Treaty of Fort Laramie.
This treaty created a vast Sioux reservation area, set apart for the absolute and undisturbed use and occupation of the Indians here in Maine.
But it wasn't long before thirst for resources, this time gold, put the Indians' ownership of the Black Hills in jeopardy. Private Theodore Ewart said,
The United States government forgot its honor, forgot the sacred treaty, forgot its integrity, and ordered an expedition for the invasion of the Black Hills.
Colonel George A. Custer, eager to make a name for himself, underestimated the Sioux' superior fighting capabilities and launched an unprovoked attack.
As Private William Taylor observed,
Over sage and mulberry bushes, over prickly pears, and through a prairie dog village without a thought we rode. To most of us, it was our first real battle at close range. Many, of whom I was one, had never fired a shot from a horse's back.
Today is a good day to die.
Only heaven and earth flash law.
They came not in line like soldiers, but in flocks, hanging on with one arm around the neck and one leg over the horse, firing and lancing from underneath the horses' necks, so there was no part of the Indian at which to aim.
Red Horse signed,
No.
Prisoners taken.
Only one American soldier survived, yet Private Taylor remained sympathetic.
In a little depression there lay outstretched a stalwart Sioux warrior, stark naked with the exception of a breechclout and moccasins. I could not help feeling a sorrow as I stood gazing upon him. He was within a few hundred yards of his home and family, which we had attempted to destroy, and he had tried to defend.
Gold was found in the Black Hills, and the government's need for this resource once again conflicted with the terms of the Fort Laramie Treaty.
I, General Crook, must sadly admit that greed and avarice on the part of the whites, in other words, the almighty dollar, is at the bottom of 9/10 of all our Indian troubles.
Conflict over resources compromised American values of the rule of law.
In 1890, on the Pine Ridge Reservation, where the majority of the Sioux tribe had been sequestered, the Lakota Sioux performed the Ghost Dance in a desperate attempt to regain sovereignty.
This dance had been banned by the U.S. government.
They chased us to Wounded Knee. The soldiers fired at us, killing us as we ran, but there was nowhere to hide.
Chief Black Elk survived the tragedy at Wounded Knee and said,
I did not know then how much was ended. When I look back now from this high hill of my old age, I can still see the butchered women and children lying heaped and scattered all along the Crooked Gulch, as plain as when I saw them with eyes still young, and I can see that something else died there in the bloody mud and was buried in the blizzard. A people's dream died there. It was a beautiful dream.
Water is life, you can't drink oil. Ha ha, ho ho, the DAPL has got to go.
The Dakota Access Pipeline, carrying 570,000 barrels of oil a day, violates the National Historic Preservation Act.
The Standing Rock Sioux strongly opposed the Dakota Access Pipeline because it could pollute their only water source, the Missouri River, violating the Clean Water Act and the National Environmental Policy Act.
Conflict over resources compromised American values of democracy. On March 27, 2017, President Trump approved the Keystone XL pipeline.
I, Craig Stevens, as the spokesperson for the Midwest Alliance Infrastructure Now, can assure you, these new pipelines are among the most technologically advanced ever constructed and exceed many state and federal guidelines.
On November 18, 2017, South Dakota's Keystone Pipeline spilled approximately 210,000 gallons of oil into Amherst, South Dakota.
What Reverend Burrell said in the 1800s still stands today.
Who shall be responsible for this event so dark and sorrowful? The history of our dealings with these Indian tribes from the very beginning is a record of fraud and perjury and uninterrupted injustice. We have made treaties, binding ourselves to the most solemn promises in the name of God, intending at that very time to hold these treaties light as air whenever our convenience should require them to be broken. We have driven them each year further from their original homes and hunting grounds. We have treated them as having no rights at all. We have made beggars of them.
In 2018, the ongoing battle for resources continued to violate the Fort Laramie Treaties of 1851 and 1868.
As conflict continues, the American values of equality, democracy, and the rule of law remain compromised, from sea to shining sea.
The connection between past and present is unmistakable on the Lakota reservations of 2018. On this barren corner of South Dakota, alcoholism, encouraged by white settlers in the 19th century, still plagues 2/3 of the adult American Indian population. Among the impoverished survivors are the descendants of many warriors who fought valiantly in their strive for independence. The conflicts of language, culture, religion, and values between the white settlers and the American Indians was so profound that compromise was impossible.
The United States still has the opportunity to compromise and validate the Fort Laramie Treaty of 1868.
America, America, God shed his grace on thee and crowned thy good with brotherhood from sea to shining sea.
Red Cloud, they made us many promises, more than I can remember, but they never kept but one.
They promised to take our land,
And
they took it.